Ruth, a 38-year-old hospital administrator, stared at her bedroom's ceiling, watching shadows dance across the textured surface. The digital clock on her nightstand cast a harsh blue glow. 11:47 p.m. Another night of inevitable tossing and turning stretched before her like an unwelcome journey. She exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar tightness in her chest, the physical manifestation of anxieties that refused to be silenced by nightfall. The day's concerns had followed her home like persistent shadows. Budget cuts at the hospital, her aging mother's health, and the looming mortgage payment each multiplied in the darkness, defying resolution. Her body ached with the peculiar exhaustion that comes not from physical exertion but from carrying emotional burdens too heavy for too long. Not again, she whispered to the empty room, pressing her palms against her tired eyes. Sleep had become elusive, transforming from natural necessity into something she pursued yet could not capture. Ruth had tried everything: meditation apps, breathing techniques, herbal supplements, even prescription medications that left her groggy yet somehow still conscious. Ruth's relationship with faith had evolved through the years, resembling the ebb and flow of an inconstant tide. Raised in a devout Methodist household, she had attended Sunday school faithfully as a child, finding comfort in the stories of Jesus calming storms and healing the broken. Though she had drifted from regular church attendance in her 30s, fragments of those early teachings remained. On difficult nights, she found herself remembering scripture passages, echoes of comfort from a faith that had once seemed so straightforward. With practiced movements, Ruth began her bedtime ritual, not from anticipation of rest, but from the disciplined hope that routine might eventually invite sleep. She dimmed her bedroom lamp to a soft amber glow that transformed the space into a warm sanctuary. The familiar objects around her, framed photographs, the watercolor from Maine, half-read books, took on gentler contours in the subdued light. From her nightstand drawer, she withdrew the small Bible her grandmother had given her for her confirmation, its leather cover softened by years of handling, its pages marked with faded highlighter and various notations that chronicled her spiritual journey. Like a traveler seeking an ancient map, she hadn't opened it for months, but tonight she felt drawn to its weathered promise of comfort. Ruth's fingers found Psalm 23 without conscious thought, her childhood memory guiding her to those ancient words of a shepherd's care. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." She read softly, allowing the familiar cadence to wash over her. The poetic assurance of green pastures and still waters stood in stark contrast to her internal landscape of anxiety and restlessness. Setting the Bible aside, she switched off the lamp and settled against her pillows. In the darkness, she whispered the prayer that had become her nightly petition: "Please, just let me sleep. Just a few hours of peace." The simplicity of the request belied its profound importance. Sleep had become more than physical necessity, it represented a temporary escape from worry. Minutes passed as Ruth focused on her breathing: in for 4 counts, hold for 7, out for 8. Gradually, her racing thoughts began to slow. The tension in her shoulders eased incrementally. The sounds of her apartment building seemed to recede, as if the world were gently withdrawing to give her space for rest. For the first time in weeks, Ruth felt the distinct shift in consciousness that precedes sleep, that curious sensation of simultaneously sinking and floating. Images began to form and dissolve behind her closed eyelids as her awareness drifted from wakefulness. As she descended towards sleep, Ruth noticed something unusual. The ambient sounds of her bedroom were changing. Her air conditioner's mechanical hum transformed, becoming rhythmic and organic, like water lapping against something solid. The faint traffic noise shifted, resembling distant human voices speaking in unfamiliar cadences. The very air around her changed texture, becoming warmer, less processed. Her senses detected unfamiliar scents, something vegetal and earthy, mixed with smoke and salt. The mattress beneath her seemed to change consistency, modern memory foam giving way to something less yielding. In the liminal space between sleeping and waking, Ruth experienced a peculiar awareness that she was transitioning not merely between consciousness states but between realities. Her analytical mind offered brief resistance, but the experience carried an authenticity that bypassed intellectual objection. With dreamlike logic that accepts the impossible, Ruth understood she was being drawn into a different time and place. Her modern bedroom was dissolving around her, its familiar boundaries becoming permeable. Through half-opened eyes that saw what physical sight could not, she perceived warm amber light replacing the cool darkness of her room. The solid walls seemed to disappear, opening to an expansive evening sky painted with colors no digital screen could replicate. As her consciousness completed its extraordinary transition, Ruth became aware that she was no longer in her apartment in the 21st century. The sensation was not frightening but rather filled with profound curiosity and unexpected peace. Something in her recognized this place she had never physically visited, the shores of ancient Galilee, where teachings that had traveled through millennia had first been spoken. Shores of ancient Galilee, a sensory awakening. The shores of ancient Galilee revealed themselves not as Ruth had imagined from Sunday school illustrations, but as a living, breathing world that engaged every sense with unexpected intensity. The historical landscape emerged around her with startling clarity, not as a static backdrop for biblical narratives, but as a vibrant reality with textures, aromas, and sounds that no historical account had adequately conveyed. Her consciousness, having traversed the boundaries of time, now anchored itself firmly in this unfamiliar yet profoundly recognizable setting. The disorientation came from overwhelming sensory input, as Ruth's modern perceptions confronted the unfiltered ancient world, a living canvas where each element shifted and breathed with authentic life. Her rational mind searched for explanations, a vivid dream, perhaps, or some neurological phenomenon, yet her senses reported with such precision that theoretical questions gradually subsided beneath the weight of immediate experience. Before her stretched the Sea of Galilee in evening light, its surface transformed into sheets of burnished copper where the setting sun touched the water. This body of water possessed character and vitality far beyond sanitized storybook images. Small waves lapped persistently at the shoreline, each catching the amber light differently, creating a constantly shifting mosaic of illumination. The water presented a complex palette of teal, amber, and deep shadow where depth changed. Fishing boats dotted the water, their wooden frames silhouetted against the evening sky as they returned homeward after a day's labor. These were handcrafted working vessels with patched sails now being lowered, their wooden hulls weathered by constant exposure to sun and water. Their movements created gentle disturbances in the water's surface, sending ripples outward in expanding circles that captured the fading light. The ambient soundscape enveloped Ruth in layers of unfamiliar yet fundamentally human activity. Conversations flowed in what she somehow recognized as Aramaic, not that she understood the words, but rather that her consciousness identified the ancient language that Jesus himself would have spoken. The cadence and tone carried across the water with surprising clarity, punctuated by laughter or calls between fishermen. Water birds circled overhead, their cries distinctive from the seagulls of modern coastlines. These sounds intermingled with the persistent creaking of wooden boats settling against crude moorings, a rhythmic groaning of wood against wood that spoke of technology limited to natural materials and human ingenuity. From nearby settlements came the distant sounds of evening activities, the rhythmic thudding of something being pounded, perhaps grain or spices, and occasional bleating of goats. The aromas of this ancient evening transported Ruth most powerfully. Wood smoke from cooking fires rose in thin columns from the shoreline settlements, carrying the distinctive smell of olive wood burning, sweeter and more pungent than the pine fires she had known in her youth. This base note mingled with the smell of fresh fish being prepared and the comforting scent of bread baking, its yeasty warmth a human constant recognizable across millennia. Underlying these specifics was something more fundamental that Ruth could only identify as the smell of the ancient world itself. Earth unpaved, fabrics woven by hand, bodies washed in lake water. Ruth became aware of the texture beneath her feet, coarser shore material interspersed with small pebbles and occasional fragments of shell. The evening breeze coming off the water carried a gentle moisture that settled on her skin, neither cool nor warm but perfectly matched to human comfort as the day's heat dissipated. This breeze stirred her clothing, reminding her of her physical presence in this extraordinary moment. Her appearance had somehow adjusted to this environment. Her modern sleepwear had been replaced by simple garments of undyed cloth, a long tunic and shawl-like outer covering. The natural fibers felt heavier than the synthetic materials she was accustomed to, yet fundamentally comfortable in their drape and weight. Her feet were clad in simple leather sandals that left her ankles exposed to the evening air.